Welcome back into another XRP podcast. Today it's going to be a good one because we'll break down all things going on in the market. Ripple is not going to file an IPO, so that is going to be news we'll talk about along with many other things. It is going to be a hot one out there. One thing I want you guys to do right now is, of course, jump over and subscribe to the channel if you have not already done that. And the other thing I want you to do is give us a like on a video, maybe on this one. If you're watching it after, make sure and do that. I want to kind of go into the market real quick before I bring in Evan Aldo, who will be joining me today. We'll look at some charts, but we'll also look at some of the macro events that are going on right now. One of the biggest things I want to make sure you guys, of course, are seeing, market cap holding right now at 3.18 trillion, which is dipping down slightly after the last few days of a nice little run coming into the market as we start to see a lot of tokens heat up, including XRP, which has been pretty much the star of the show over the last few days. Of course, right now you've got Bitcoin up slightly on the day, Ethereum also up slightly on the 30-day, and then you, of course, have XRP up 6%, solid 6% on the 30-day, up 18% on the 7-day. So if you guys were getting in when it was around $1.80, kudos to you. That's what we're talking about, buying the dip and, of course, getting in and being able to ride this out. The real question, is this a short-term fix on a market bump, or are we seeing a cycle trend starting to develop? So joining me today is Mr. Evan Aldo. You know him over there. How is it going, Evan?
Doing fantastic, man. Always great to be on. Always great to talk to you, Paul.
Yeah, we got a lot to talk about today. One of the things, of course, for our audience, the biggest news was that Ripple ditched their IPO plans. This, of course, changes maybe something for 2026, but I still think we're probably pressuring a little bit of activity. And it's interesting, this news came out today. And ironically, I think I put out a tweet yesterday. Was it yesterday? Let me go back to my timeline here. Yeah, here it is. 12 hours ago, I put out this tweet, which was which IPO would matter most. And of course, Ripple wins. But I had SpaceX on there, so maybe we'll get a SpaceX IPO this year. Polymarket also got a nice little portion of it. Discord announced that they were going public, but nobody cares.
Yeah, that's not, yeah.
At least not in crypto land. Nobody cares in crypto land. Anyway, when you look at the XRP token right now, with all this good news up 20% in the last week, everybody that was buying that on the dip looked like absolute brainiacs. What do you look like? What does it look like right now on the chart? Are we consolidating from here? Where are we going?
It looks like most likely we're consolidating. Let me share my chart right here. As you can see it, the first thing I'll talk about is that, you're hitting kind of a, place in the sand, which is right around $2.40, some consolidation. I think that this big line right here, which is your 200 daily moving average, I think you'll hit it by the next FOMC meeting. So at least coming up to 250. If things get even better than that, potentially up to the high twos by the end of this month, early February. Okay. My view has been that Powell could knock us down, that the FOMC meeting can knock us down. And then if you look at, previous potential areas that we could hit, here's your more on the macro, next 4 to 6 months, you get a correction from here down to maybe, I know a lot of people are going to hate this, but maybe the low dollar area, that kind of area for a potential 50% correction. And that's the same for Bitcoin. That's the same for a lot of these. I do think XRP can outperform Bitcoin at least a little bit over the next 4 to 6 months, like most alts right now, given monetary policy. But yeah, I just can't bet, as of right now, I can't bet against like some type of bear market in 2026, especially with, silver going crazy. I think Powell is going to knock us down. That's my fear. Just like he knocked us down in January of 2025 when he paused. So yeah.
I don't know. I'm not so sold in on this. Let me play this clip for you and take a listen.
The hottest crypto trade of the year is not Bitcoin. It is not Ether. It is XRP, the coin formerly known as Ripple, soaring more than 20% this year, becoming the third largest cryptocurrency out there. And there's big money behind this trade. Mackenzie Sagalos joins us now with that XRP trade and what, Mac, is driving all of this interest in XRP.
Well, what's actually been interesting is that during the doldrums of Q4, you actually saw a lot of people piling into those XRP ETFs, which is the exact opposite of what happens with the spot Bitcoin and Ether ETFs, where people really move in tandem with the price of the coin. But it was the fact that it is a way to have a higher percentage jump. So people were buying the dip with XRP in Q4, thinking this is a less crowded trade than Bitcoin or Ether. And then that proved out to be true just in the first 6 trading days of January.
All right, so they hit on a few things. I'll finish this up here, but a few things. First of all, the fact that we have mainstream really going in on XRP is a little weird.
Yeah.
First, and the fact that they go into the utility of it is even more bizarre. But the point is that, and I think they hit on, and that is institutional interest is there. And if we do get some pressure from ETFs continuing to fly, which XRP ETFs have done, what do you think? Would you change your opinion on a bear market or let me ask you this? Because this was a question that a handful of analysts have kind of gone in the direction I am. And we may see a light bear market for Bitcoin and maybe a handful of the upper. But some of these utility tokens, because of what we're seeing in Wall Street and some of the other factors from a global perspective, could actually trend up. Maybe not in the sense of, parabolic moves, but positive on the year. Would you change your opinion based on that?
Yeah, and I'll tell you what would let me show you my chart. What would happen that would strengthen, that opinion right here.
Let's
if
do
we
it.
look at our chart right here, I think the big thing that we want to do to kind of fit that narrative would be break above and hold 250 right here. Hold this 200 daily moving average, and then eventually break up to these areas. So if you can do something like this and keep going upward, you're in beginning of February after that FOMC meeting, you're still going upward, then that would fit the narrative to keep going. Okay. In addition here, if you're thinking about XRP versus Bitcoin, I do think they're kind of right on that, that view, because this just looks so good right here on your 2-week on XRP versus Bitcoin. So I think over the next few years, you can rally upward towards these areas, these highs that you saw in 2018. That's 300% against Bitcoin, which is potential. There's potential there. And I think alts are going to do pretty well over the next few years. The good alts, the utility alts with good fundamentals, I should say. But I think there's that potential. So I want to see what happens with this FOMC meeting. If we can keep going upward, after this FOMC meeting into early February, I would turn to a more bullish tone.
Okay. All right. Here was an analysis that we were working on from the commodity standpoint. And this is just another layer of why I think XRP could play into this. And I tweeted this out. I'll share this with you guys because it's a good example of what I think could be coming our way. And this was a Bank of America analyst. Let me kind of bring it up here on screen. This is a Bank of America analyst, Michael Hartnett, which I followed for quite a while. But he's basically calling for a commodity rally. And the thesis was that we're shifting away from this new monetary easing into an era of fiscal expansion, populism, and most likely some inflation. So bonds are out, real estate or real assets in. This is why XRP, I think, matters if Hartnett's right. And we get into this whole idea around the cycle of fiat debasement, which is where I think we're going. Capital is going to flee a little bit, and we're going to see a whole narrative spilling into crypto. And XRP is the one non-sovereign settlement layer that gets into this new fractured global economy. So this gets back to this bigger picture. And I mean, come on, Trump goes in and grabs the Venezuelan president. We are getting into hemisphere type control. I mean, what was it? The Monroe Doctrine, I believe, that they put forward, where basically they were saying everything in the Western Hemisphere is ours, stay back. And if that is the case, which now, I mean, there are some things happening around Greenland. There's some things happening around Colombia. There's things happening around Panama being talked about.
Well, that's all talk.
It is talk, but so was let's go in and grab Maduro.
Well, the betting odds that Maduro would have been out at some point in 2026 were much higher than the betting odds of Panama Canal.
All right, what's your thesis on the Greenland issue?
That's not gonna.
You don't think it's gonna happen?
No, that's.
I'm gonna do counter on you.
Well, Paul, you could bet on it on Polymarket. You get a 10%.
I'll put some money.
So you could turn $100,000 into $1 million easily with that. So
there you go. Boom! That could be it. Well, the fact that we are getting into higher inflation, more situations around populism, which of course gets more nationalist, this is going to create some opportunities, I think, for XRP in general. So that's just
yes. And I think that now that you have potentially gold and silver getting boring, consolidating,
Yep.
you may have more money going into energy stuff. I mean, I was looking at some things like Occidental Petroleum. That looks pretty good. I don't know if I'd bet on oil itself right now, but energy probably will see a bull market. As people get bored with gold and silver, what other commodities are they going to put it into? Probably energy stuff. So
the trade against Bitcoin right now seems like the perfect thing to do. When you look at Bitcoin defending 92K, ETH, of course, sliding slightly, is if you were trading ETH, Bitcoin, XRP this year, what are you picking?
Ethereum probably, but I think that Ethereum is the safest bet right now because it's outperformed Bitcoin since April. And most other alts haven't done that. So I think I would look to wait and see which alts outperform Bitcoin for the next 4 to 6 months. And all of those are potentially moon bags into the end of this decade. But I think Ethereum is your safest potential bet right now. Ethereum even looks more attractive to me than Bitcoin right now. Obviously, I would probably have to swallow my words if ETH bleeds against Bitcoin for the next 4 to 6 months, but I think that's highly unlikely. I think that ETH is going to do similar to what it did the last time the Fed ended QT, which was end of July of 2019. You went on a rally against Bitcoin for years, and you were able to hold up against Bitcoin through the pandemic, through all sorts of stuff. So
yeah,
I would be very bullish on ETH. I think ETH should be a bigger position than XRP right now, but if XRP could continue to show strength against Bitcoin over the next 4 to 6 months, then we could talk about having a higher XRP percentage.
I'm going to go with XRP. Just I feel like it's the play for right now under these market conditions. Now, granted, if we get the market structure bill and we see some major involvement of companies that of course is going to benefit Ripple and benefit XRP. It's going to benefit Ethereum, Solana, a lot of the blockchains out there in general. So that is the way to look at it. But I just don't know. I think XRP has a potential, if given the right environment of high inflation, more macro pressures of countries now, because if you get into more of this populism approach, it is going to create much more pressure on SWIFT to be less and less of an important factor. And to me, there's only one winner if that does happen. It's going to be XRP, well, Ripple in general. Yeah. So that's why I'm playing and hedging my bet there. ETH is a little different game. I get it. They're trying to solve the trilemma, claiming that they have done it. But at the same time, we haven't really seen it in terms of the ETH chart. What about the ETH chart? Show me why you think this would be the play.
Couple things. So let's get our chart up right here. And the first thing we'll look at in ETH is, I'll just show you what I think is probably going to most likely happen. You're going to get it up to your daily 200 around 3,600, 3,500 by the time you hit it. And then I think your 2-week 200 SMA that you bounced off of right here in March of 25, that'll be your typical kind of correction from, excuse all these lines, but from that correction, about 49, 48%. I think a lot of things can correct about 50%. You hit this around 1,800 to 2,000. That's a really, really, really good buy for Ethereum right there. So something like this, maybe into the summer, in the next few years, going up to potentially 5K, 10K.
So you don't see a short-term pump for ETH?
Not, well, depending, how do you define a short-term pump?
Next 90 days.
Yeah, until that FOMC meeting, I could see 3,500 to 3,700. Okay. Now, here's where you can get into super cycle. If you can hold 36, 3,700, hold these areas, especially into early February, and keep going, then you're getting into super cycle. We could talk about new all-time highs. Until then, I don't think that's going to be the case. Now, the other important thing to look at here is ETH versus Bitcoin. It's outperformed Bitcoin by quite a bit since April 2025. It still looks really good against Bitcoin here. If we zoom out even more, this is the last time the Fed ended QT, like clockwork. Look at that. You've outperformed Bitcoin for years. You may see a similar type of situation happen here into the end of this decade, into 2028, potentially even getting back to those highs. I mean, it's going to be hard, but potentially getting back to those highs on your Bitcoin valuation that you had in June of 2017. People are going to be talking about the flipping, the Ethereum flipping big Bitcoin. If that does happen, I do think there is that potential to at least get close to those areas. So I am very bullish on ETH for that reason. Now, the last thing I'll show you quickly, let's talk about XRP versus ETH. If you're looking at which one, XRP, I'll give it to you. it does look good against ETH right now. You may be right, Paul, but I'm a little bit more on the cautious side here because XRP is a little bit more of a smaller market cap. But if you can show strength against ETH into March, into April, then I would get more bullish on the XRP evaluation. And hopefully we can get back to these December 2018 highs. I think if the fundamentals are right, which they are, you can do something like this. So XRP is good. It's definitely good.
It takes so little to move the market for XRP. And if you get this continuation on Wall Street and institutional capital loving this company and what they're doing, and even though Ripple announced no IPO this year, that tells me one thing. They are planning something big this year for acquisition because that's going to pad their IPO and their market price when they do go public. So that means they've got some big acquisitions or some big rollouts planned for 2026. And that to me will start to generate more interest, especially in Wall Street, because they're already interested in this token from an ETF standpoint. We've talked to several of the ETF managers that have continued to push in that direction. So
you're making
that would be my thesis.
We're talking, Paul. You're making me really think.
Well, I'm just, you got to think about the dominoes, that play into this. And I still have that wild card domino, which is this whole area around commodities. And back to my thesis of around the Monroe Doctrine and whether or not we see Trump trying to do some crazy. Listen, he's got 3 more years in office. Okay.
Yep.
And if this thing with Venezuela turns out to where they actually become a contributing member of LATAM, I mean, they have been, but not in the way they could be. This is one of the richest nations out there. If they come to the game with any kind of resources, whether it's the iron resources, the oil resources, the gold resources, of which most have not been available in terms of extraction, the only way you could really create value is to tokenize it. And if they do, and they get smart about it, they could open up Venezuela to an economic boom. Did you see their stock market over the last couple of days?
It's a guy covering. Yeah.
It went crazy. Crazy. These people are ready. They are ready to become a leading nation, and this may be the chance they get. So just think about that.
Let's hope. Yeah.
Let's talk about Solana for a second. Overtaking Ethereum in reference to tokenized stocks. And this to me is a big deal because mainly I think tokenized stocks we're going to continue to see a lot more growth around this. And besides the fact that it has overtaken Ethereum, it hasn't necessarily performed as well on the charts. So if you were betting ETH or Solana, what would you do?
Right now, I would be more cautious and go for ETH. However, if Solana can outperform ETH for the next 4 to 6 months, definitely would convert some over to Solana. Let's look at the Solana chart right here. And if we find that chart, so similar thing to a lot of things, daily right here, I think in the short term, this could actually pump a lot more, maybe up to 160, maybe up to kind of this pocket right here. Just like everything else, if you can break above these areas past your FOMC meeting, then it gets more bullish. We could talk about new all-time highs, but until then, I think that's the big kind of line in the sand. Now, the other thing to realize here is you got your 200 weekly moving average. It's at a lower point too. It's at like $100, which is only a 25% correction from where we are right now. But if you look at from the all-time high, that's about a 65% correction, which I would think would be from a lot of things, including Bitcoin, could be where we end up in terms of that correction. The 2 week right here, I mean, it does look good. We just want to see what ends up happening with it. My fear is that you could just kind of roll over and come back to that 100 mark kind of after that. I would say your worst case scenario for this is probably that $80 mark, which would be a nice, really good buy at like a 70%, drawdown if you do see that in the summer. Now, we were talking about Solana versus ETH. That's the big thing to look at too. It is getting a pretty big area, hitting a pretty big area right here, as you can see in the 2 week. Your EMAs are still gray, which kind of makes me think that you're gonna potentially drop down over the next few months. It doesn't look as good as XRP against ETH. I would definitely rather bet on XRP as opposed to Solana right now, because this is kind of my fear on that evaluation. But if you can get down to this point against Ethereum over the summer, which I think is probably going to be the place to get in, that's where I would be looking at. That's really what I'd be looking at. A little bit cautious little bit cautious right now. So just keep that in mind.
Things are heating up on the world stage, Evan. I want to bring in a few Kobe Easy posts here. One of the ones that broke this morning, which I think is important to crypto in general, and that is because it affects a lot of what's happening in the AI trade. This, of course, was China suspending NVIDIA's chip purchases. So they asked all their companies to halt the H200 chip orders. This is a big deal. This could hit NVIDIA pretty badly. This is something that many people have been talking about for quite some time. Taylor Ogden, who is Snowball Capital, if you guys don't know anything about Snowball is a company that was trading here in the U.S. They were an investment house, and they moved their entire operations into China. And the reason was that they were looking at these growth potentials, and one of the categories was that China would eventually be their own chip builder. So this is literally East versus West going into the biggest race we've ever been, which is the AI race. So what do you think about that? Do you think this shifts your AI trade any at all?
So, I mean, my view is that AI has been a little bit, including NVIDIA, when I look at things like Palantir, I do think
Overheated?
Way overheated right now. And I do think that Tesla as well. I mean, everything, S&P 500, even NASDAQ, I think everything's due for that, at least 15-20% correction in 2026, which would be kind of a healthy correction. Yeah. Those charts do look, they look very overheated, especially in NVIDIA. But I do think, with blood comes opportunity. 6 months, 8 months from now, I think there's going to be big opportunities there, especially on things like Palantir. I mean, that could be a good one too.
Well, if we do get a pullback, the point will be is these companies are going to retrace, relook at how they're approaching certain markets, China being one of them. And I think you're going to see some pretty big acceleration maybe into some other markets that NVIDIA has unfortunately not necessarily focused on because they've kind of had easy pickings in China, for as a chip customer in general. All right. So other news. Wall Street just released the Dow Jones announced their exclusive partnership with Polymarket. So this is a big deal for data coming off of the Dow. Do you think this helps Polymarket's position of possibly going public or launching a token?
Definitely helps its position of going public. I don't know if they really want, I hope they don't launch a token, to be honest with you, because there's just, there's so much oversaturation. But then again, in terms of fiscal monetary policy, maybe it's not the worst time. I do think Polymarket's got a good future. In a few years, it's going to get much more regulated. And I think that, maybe in 5 years, you're not going to be able to bet on certain things you could bet on right now, like China invading Taiwan and stuff like that. I think there's going to be some ethical concerns there. I mean, right now, the thing that's crazy about Polymarket is like, you could bet on when the next episode of Stranger Things is coming out. It wouldn't be surprising to me if everyone who worked on that show, we know when it's coming out.
Yeah, there's a lot of inside trading.
So much.
Yeah. There's a lot of inside trading with that. I mean, we're already seeing it. We saw the trade that happened on the Maduro capture, where someone came in, did 30 grand, made a nice 400 grand in a little 36 hour trade. Americans holding multiple jobs hits a multi-decade high. This, of course, is becoming a big deal because labor trends are still hot. Do you feel that this market right now is institutional led versus consumer? And do you think that's going to last through the end of this year?
I think that it's a little bit more institutional. And I think that you're going to see more pressure with potentially higher inflation numbers. Yeah, potentially a more hawkish Fed with Powell going out at a more hawkish tone. So I do think that things will come down a bit. I do think some retail probably will sell as well. If you look at fear and greed, we're already in a neutral area. I would assume within a week or two, we'll actually be in a greed area for Bitcoin, which would lead to, potentially some retail selling as well. In terms of multiple jobs, I think that's kind of more of the gig economy type thing. And I think you only have a few more years of the gig economy being strong. In other words, people doing Uber, delivering food before a lot of it gets automated. And, people just can't do that as a secondary job or can't do that when they lose their job and still make a living. So that'll probably lead to the next recession. But I think you're going to see higher yields, for the next few years. I don't think they're going to really come down until asset prices really drop. So, yeah.
Well, asset prices are going to have to drop. Obviously, we'll see things from the Fed side of things. Real estate's going to be another big concern I have, at least here in the United States right now. Where would be the best real estate market that you would look at globally? You've been everywhere, man.
Yeah, there's a couple, man. I mean, Colombia does. I mean, there's certain safety risks in that. Colombia has a very high yield And most people are not buying on leverage at all. There's very little debt in the market. So that's a stable market. Japan, that could be one. Japan could be one. I think the emerging ones where a lot of people have gone to, like Thailand, foreigners can own land. The ones that we can own land in Asia could be good. I don't even know if foreigners could own land in Singapore. I forget, but Malaysia is definitely a good one. Singapore, I don't see how that could, go down significantly. I think the thing I'll say here is we look really good. The U.S. looks really good now with the Venezuela thing, but our luck could have been worse there. And our luck may not be as good. And I hate to say it, but where we are in the cycle of the empires and everything is like, if anything, the U.S. is going to lose land in the next 30 or 40 years rather than gain more lands. So.
I'm on the opposite side, man. I'm on the opposite side of this with you. And my position is that, let's look at this. Just going back. I don't know if this is right, but if I am Trump and I've got a chance to go in, right now you got Polymarket, this coming from Finbold, odds of Trump acquiring Greenland in 2026 surging to an all-time high. There's the move right now. And it's based on, for obvious reasons, what happened in Venezuela. But I think also that you have Greenland, who is already said we're interested in joining the United States, or we're interested in an offer. And whether you get a Puerto Rico type a scenario that plays into this, or you get something else that could go into this. But I think right now Trump is trying to shore up and cut off all lines into the Western Hemisphere from China and Russia, which are the biggest issues. And when you get into that debasement trade, look at the chains that are going to be benefiting from that. And I go back to XRP a lot.
I'll tell you what, Paul, let me know if this goes up to 50%. If it goes
to 50, it's over.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you if it goes to 50. 15, that's the same odds of China invading Taiwan, I think. It's around 10 or 50.
Shall we go back and look at the Maduro chart?
Yeah, well, that was, I don't know about the...
there was a 15% period.
Okay, well. You had one unlikely bet. The next bets, those unlikely bets only happen so often.
Yeah, well, this one goes all the way through the end of this year. So you can play this all the way to 2026. You can grab the 15% now. I'm going to place a Polymarket on this one. This one I'm going to grab at 15%.
Okay.
I think it's probably better than playing blackjack if I go to Vegas.
Those bets, you're gonna have to wait some time for an outcome. You bet on probably the same odds of the Seahawks or the Eagles winning the Super Bowl, 15% right now. So.
Who you got in the Super Bowl, man?
I don't know. It's tough. The Seahawks are favored. They could be the Eagles, Eagles again, maybe. I don't know. It's tough to say. Maybe I'd bet on the Eagles. I don't know.
There you go, Eagles. I think it's going to be an odd Super Bowl again. Jacksonville maybe come in, and they're playing hot right now. We won't talk about football too much. One token that you are watching right now, is there any trade that you're thinking about today that you might go into?
Maybe Chainlink, man, because if we look at Chainlink, and I would be a little bit careful with it. Let me get my screen up here. If we let's go to our Chainlink chart right here. And what's interesting about this is that when you zoom out here, we keep making higher lows, which is pretty good. I kind of like this. And I do think that if you just follow this kind of pattern, you maybe be able to jump back up to $20, maybe a potential double if it does, get good here. Your weekly 200 moving average was already hit here. So it's a little bit different than Bitcoin. And this tends to do pretty well, like back, where was it, in 2019? So if you
it had that kind of run. Yeah,
this could be a wild card, Paul. This could be a wild card where it comes up where everything else, doesn't do too much.
Man, Tim would love you on that. One of our other traders, because he is a Chainlink. He's a Chainlink fan in a big way. You guys know what to do. Make sure and check out Evan Aldo over on YouTube. We will show his YouTube channel here, so you can follow. We'll leave a link down there. Do that as well. Tell him we sent you right here from the XRP podcast, and of course. Evan, thanks for coming in today, man.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Paul.
All right, you guys know what to do. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone out there who has not got into crypto, because I think this is going to be an interesting year, at the very least, around some of these assets. So we'll catch you next time right here on the XRP Pod. Take care.